and gentlemen, welcome to David Nair on Air, all the way from down under Brisbane, Australia. I understand the event is being viewed by audience from across India, Australia, South Africa, UAE, US, Canada, UK, Europe, Malaysia, Singapore, and a number of other countries. David Nair is a peak performance coach, keynote speaker, author of a book titled I Excel, Wired for Success. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring this weekly broadcast at the request of many of my participants and a lot of the coaches in the community who have wanted to sort of get a feel for how can they maximize their daily performances and at the same time master certain specific patterns for change by role modeling some good performers around the globe. So what we do is we actually search constantly for some powerful, excellent performers from across the globe, from different parts of the world, and put them in front of you so you can at least cut, copy, paste some of the practices, cut, copy, paste some of the things they do and how they do it to maximize your performance. Today, we have one such lady all the way from South Africa, Cape Town. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an exceptional lady who has been in the industry for a number of years. And Rosemary, I met her about 2.5 to 3 years ago whilst I was working in Cape Town. Fabulous lady, an enormous depth of experience in corporate training and at the same time in leadership roles that she played in the corporate arena, in particularly women leadership development. Rosemary is not just a person who just pontificates on how good practices are done, but more she's worked in the trenches, she's been with people, and at the same time, she is out there delivering what I say, walk the walk before you do the talk. I personally know Rosemary, and I believe what she's going to share with you is going to be of enormous benefit. Please take a notepad, paper, and pencil and take some good notes as she's going to walk through some of her experiences of how she has helped break through and transform a lot of people. Ladies and gentlemen, without much delay, let me just introduce who Rosemary is from a perspective of her career. A relationship and life transformational coach and a mentor, a founder of a magnificent group of people. Particularly from a consulting base, she has built an organization, an effective corporate trainer that spans in excess of 2 decades of working, a mother and a hip-hop grandmother. Guess what? An L&D expert. I would like you to invite Rosemary to share her story and impact you and the rest of the community. Welcome aboard, Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for having me, and hello to everybody out there in this big, bright, beautiful world. So, wow. So David and I met 2 years ago in Cape Town, and he was part of the beginning of my coaching journey. And in those days, we didn't have Zoom. We didn't do anything on webinars. So poor David or whoever else would fly in from Dubai, India, Australia, Malaysia. And I know that David was traveling throughout the world. So on one of those occasions, we were not able to book the Radisson Hotel in Cape Town. David was booked into a beautiful B&B on the slopes of our lovely Table Mountain, and he was late. I think David was flying in from Malaysia. So he asked me to let the group know that we would be having our meeting at the guest house because they'd booked an apartment, and would I buy food. So with a boot full of food for 12 people, I drove up halfway up the slopes of Table Mountain, rang the doorbell outside the guest house, and the lady's voice said, yeah. And I said, I'm here for the coach. So she peeped over the wall and she said, what coach? Where is the coach? I have been waiting all day for the coach. How big is it? How many people are there in the coach? Where are they going to park the coach? So I said to her, the coach is a gentleman. Part of his profession is a coach. And she would not allow me into the building. She said, Nair, I'm going out now. You can tell the coach with legs, you can come back at 10 o'clock at night. So I sat on the pavement waiting for David to rush through on his Uber from Malaysia or wherever, with the coach sitting there, boot full of car, made a plan, went to the Fire and Ice, a hotel down the road, had our meeting, and afterwards, do you remember, David?
I know. It's
So
amazing.
funny.
I can't believe it. For a person to misunderstand the concept of a coach as opposed to a bus coach, waiting for a bus coach of people to arrive. My God. But the story
was amazing.
The story even goes further than that, Rose. I mean, if you remember, you're handing out food from the back of your booth. There was so much of food that you bought.
Yes, because we were going to sit around and enjoy it. So after the meeting, if you remember, David, I went out, opened the boot, and everybody was starving. And then the concierge of the hotel threatened to have me arrested because he said it was illegal to sell food in front of a hotel. And then you had to calm him down with your amazing charm and skills. So that was definitely an amazing memory. Whenever I see a coach, I think of that story. And in my head, I say, there goes David.
How do you think, for us to turn around and for you in particular to start your coaching career, sitting in the garden with food packed in the boot of your car?
It's amazing.
Startling. Anyway, let's move on from there. It's interesting to sort of, and this is what, as one of both our coaches would mention, our theme talks about building your story, and these are all the snippets that put together the tapestry that we're going to show to the world of what happens in our journey of life. I really treasure those memories, and particularly, there are stories in South Africa, there are stories in Durban, there are similar stories in Dubai, India. India is amazing. 22 years in India, that's startling. I should actually write a book on that. It'll be great. Hey, Rose, tell us a little bit more about how did you think and work moving from a corporate career, got into something like what we talk about in coaching, and then all of a sudden made a paradigm shift. What were some of the things that went through you?
Well, David, for me, I was coming to the end of my corporate career. I had spent, like you said, more than 2 decades facilitating, training, teaching, whether it be anatomy, physiology skills, chemistry, pharmacology skills, so very, very broad base. And then I was in learning and development, and we set up, because of the way the world was going and people were so stressed, we set up for our middle managers to executives, right? So this lasted for 5 years, and every 6 weeks, they would come together in a group for 5 years, and they'd come back again and again and again. So we used a particular model. So when I went to the Radisson Hotel, I was very skeptical. I didn't like the name of the program. I'm just giving a bit of background. And I really felt they couldn't tell me much about coaching because of my experience. But I thought maybe I could learn something. And then I looked at the program. I looked at the system, and that's what really got me. The system and also the support. And Arfeen Khan said one thing, which then I didn't really believe and thought, how could he make this claim? I guarantee transformation every single time. So then COVID came. I went to Mumbai. I spoke on the stage. I met all the Arfeen Khan people. That's where I had a massive transformation myself on true forgiveness. And it changed me. So already I was still working my last 2 months on Zoom. And I had my farewell on Zoom. But I had realized the power of true transformation. And I just had layers and layers, like 32 years of layers of unforgiveness. So think of an onion with 32 layers. And at that very moment, I felt layer by layer just drifting off my body, taken by the wind to wherever the wind takes unforgiveness. And re-energized, revitalized. I don't use the word retired. I use the word pro-retirement. And when I left corporate, you're asking about the step. It was it was easy because I knew my time in corporate was over and I was ready for this and I was so excited. I was already certified with Afin Khan and my journey began, and it was so, so exciting. And people would ask me, what has happened to you since you left? You've got younger. Are you in love? But it's because I have the passion to do what I want to do and the freedom to live your passion and the freedom to help people. Because when I left corporate, David, I knew then I'd been living my passion because I got such moving emails and phone calls from people. And I knew then that for all those years that I had made the difference in people's lives. You know, Maya Angelou says, people don't remember what you said to them. People don't remember what you did for them, but people remember how you made them feel. I know that I inspired, motivated, helped people massively. And I took a lot of learning out of my years in corporate that I translated into my coaching sessions.
Right. That's fabulous. Now, Rose, share with us a couple of experiences where in the corporate you're doing work, training, development, and at the same time had some trigger points for transformation. Now, that transition into being a coach and a mentor and then guiding people, how do you see the two? How much of a difference is it? And then from there, share a couple of stories on it.
Yeah, so David, I had like an intuition for people. I could read people because I grew up in a big family, multi-generational. So you learn to read people. So the difference now is that I have a system that works. Right. I'm really passionate and I can do what I like, but not that different. I just have more tools now. I can help people with a mind shift, whereas before I thought you'd need a psychologist. So, and listening to people and sometimes just listening or giving a hug. So people would automatically come to me and tell me stories about how they'd been raped or how bad their manager was or their child that was a drug addict, how people don't greet them, you know, they're nothing, that kind of thing. And I find the similarity in my coaches. They're my coachees. They have exactly the same issues. But now I have better tools. I can help them see things differently. I can help people understand who they really are and why you are the way you are, and help people make powerful decisions and change their mindsets. For example, I had a client who came to me who said that he had been married for 20 years. There was no love in their marriage. They couldn't stand each other. He sat in his room and worked, and she did whatever she wanted. And he knew ultimately the outcome was that he was going to divorce him because he was in his 40s and he didn't want to spend the rest of her life with her. So when we got to the what we call the integrated power coding, we learn about those inner voices, and also and the next week we learn how to make decisions and how our inner voices, when they're not aligned with our values, we never make right decisions. But now I could help him, and we did some processes there. And the last time I saw him, when we got online, he just started weeping. And I said to him, I'll call him David. I said, David, what's happening? And he said, I can't thank you enough. My wife has moved back into the bedroom, so much so she's invited my old father, who's an alcoholic of 84, to live with him, and said that while he lives with them, that he will be the head of the house. And this man just wept because she refused to go and see him. And I said to him, what changed? He said, I changed.
Right.
I changed. And he acknowledged all of those things. And I really get goosebumps when I tell you that story. I changed. And that's what changed me as well, because we all go into relationships with great intentions, don't we? But we don't have the skill to manage those challenges. And I have a very common thread with my clients, and that's why I focus on relationships and life. You know, and women have many, many, many issues. Women have low not only women, I mean, it's a self-esteem. I'm not good enough. And just so that they can fly and help people within their communities and help their children. I mean, the system I use with my granddaughter, who's nearly 12, who's very stubborn and strong. And by asking questions, she finds her own solutions.
Right.
For example, she was going into a new grade, or like, I hate maths. She's very creative and sporty. And we have animals. And I said to her, what would happen if I was not at home and your mom was not at home, and you couldn't read and you didn't understand maths, and the cat got sick and you had medicine there? Then how would you be able to read how many drops you'd have to give the cat and how often with maths? So 3 times a day. So if you didn't know what 3 times a day was and you couldn't read, then maybe your cat would die. So do you think it would help to learn maths and read? And she said, yes, definitely. And her mindset changed.
Amazing, isn't it? See,
yeah, simple thing.
Exactly. And most people don't realize they're looking for some high funder, but actually the finite thing is small shifts that generate big gains. And that's one of the cardinal rules that I work with, having small shifts and touching them at the right spot to get that transformation and breakthrough to happen.
Exactly. And David, I mean, even when I'm coaching coaches on a global level, and you watch people, the minute you see that shift, I get so excited. It's like, hey, David, how are you feeling? What has just happened to you? Tell me. Weeping. We had a course with a man in his 60s. He came to a week that I was facilitating. And we'd already gone over time, and he said, me. And I'm saying, no, we can't, David, we can't. And the group said, let him speak. Indians are very generous like that. Where South Africans will say, okay, we'll leave it till next time because we've got things to do and places to go. So Indians have a wonderful spirit of generosity in that way. Would you agree with me?
Very much so, exceptionally much so. Yeah.
He said to me, in his 60s, bald man with a little white moustache, he said to me, I've had an issue since a child that I was told, my teacher told me I was a slow learner. I've built businesses, I have done things, but I still believe I am a slow learner. And we went through a process in questioning and mindset change and a bit of visualization, and he was weeping. He stood up weeping and he was glowing. And the next time I saw him, he had a big smile on his face. And I said, and he said, I am a fast learner. I'm amazing. And that's the power and the joy and the passion. And that's why I keep on doing this. Because like you said, David, it's the small shifts. It's not, some people might have a big bang, but it's the small shifts that are so powerful.
Sure. What is one area that you feel in your journey that has actually got you to think and then do some introspection? Topics such as leadership or conflict resolutions. What is one of those areas that you think that stands out?
Just talking about conflict resolution, I had a very good teacher. When I was becoming a coach, I had somebody who taught me all about conflict resolution in action in the Radisson Blue Hotel in Cape Town, and his name is David Nair. I don't know if you know him,
No,
I often thought, because I was in corporate, and I thought, wow, conflict resolution. And we don't teach this to everybody in corporate. We don't. And so my first thought was, wow, we've got to bring it to the program. Everybody should be taught, every mother, every father, every child. It is such an incredible skill, because if you can't manage conflict if you're not a skilled communicator. You have to be a skilled communicator, because what will happen is you'll start shouting and screaming at each other. But I remember there was a woman who attacked David. She screamed, she shouted. She used language that I thought only sailors on ships used, and then in the very deep, deep oceans. And she was a beautiful blonde person, and my eyes popped out, and there was so much anger. And I was going in my mind, this is disgusting, how bad, how rude. And I had to hold myself back, and I watched David. So David sat back. He remained very alert. He remained very calm. And by doing that, you, David, you were able to assess where she was at. You were able to assess her non-verbal body language and her verbal body language. And just by managing your own emotions and observing that person, the conflict was resolved without you having to say a word. And so that, by your emotions, by your behavior, I learned so much. And I want to thank you for that, because to this day, I remember it's so powerful. And remember, I don't know if you remember, but I wrote you a letter and I apologized for all South Africans, and I was upset, and I phoned my colleagues and we were saying, can you believe it? That's so shocking and how embarrassing. But this woman had so much that she had not dealt with in her life. You know, and that's another big learning, that we cannot judge people.
Exactly.
We can't. And from that conflict resolution, that's a very big lesson I learned, and a bigger lesson I took to corporate for the time that I had left there.
Right. You see, this is where it is. And a lot of people cover themselves with these baggages, and then it's the baggages that's weighing them down, and they come up with things that later on they regret. And now I'm going through a couple of instances like that now, where they regret it and they can't see. And I put out a video called See Beyond See. They cannot see beyond where they are because of that cloudiness. Now, only way to do that is, as you so rightly put earlier, and Arvin talks about it, you need to go inside and then start working it and digging it out such that you can control you and then do the transformation that you require from within. But most don't do it. They don't have the patience. They don't have the tolerance.
It's inside out. That's what it's all about. Oh, I've just made that up. Inside out, that's what it's all about. But it's absolutely, if we don't go inside, if we don't know who we are, we're going to blame everybody. She would blame you because of X, because of Y. It's your fault. They did the company this. I am. But if you think about it, it's just that she doesn't even know who she is. Right. And she doesn't know how to manage herself.
And that's the person you're referring to from that particular case that we had earlier.
From that episode, you know, the conflict resolution. But I know so many people like that, where they come in angry and furious and hating their managers and hating the system and hating the workload and hating, especially post-COVID and during, hating my wife, hating the kids. We're all stuck together. They're angry. Your life has changed. Can't manage it. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, I was just prior to this interview with you, or this conversation with you, I was having a chat with a justice from Michigan, and actually we hope to have him on board one of these days. And he was sharing pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Now, we have all gone through that. And I know when I was in South Africa, one of the key things that I found was the challenges that South Africa was facing pre-pandemic. And with the pandemic going through, where people had to then start living and working together 24/7 from home, when in actual fact the relationship was at a highest toxic level, how do you think that's coping? Because when I spoke to this justice, he said, suicides have gone through the roof. This has happened, but we need to learn how to cope with it. How do you think they're coping with it?
Yeah, David, you know, unfortunately, in a lot of areas in South Africa, domestic violence, gender abuse, children abuse, suicides have gone through the roof. And what they had done in some of the levels, which has stopped now, they stopped alcohol and cigarettes. But what came out of that negative thing was a booming black market, where they were selling inferior products from wherever, and people, even in the complex where I live in, there was a couple that were frantic because they were smoking like a packet of cigarettes a day, and they were paying like thousands of rand just for a carton, just so they could get. People become anxious. They didn't like each other. One of my clients said to me, I don't like my children. Can you help me? Because you're living with people 24 hours a day. You didn't see people you love. I had a client during COVID where we couldn't go out. You only went out for essentials. and her mother was in a retirement village in a town not far from Cape Town, and her mother was 90, and this happened with a lot of elderly people in retirement homes or frail care. So they were locked in a room for almost a year. They were not allowed to see their families. Their families were not allowed to see them. So I had a client that had incredible pain and a feeling and a sense of loss because she was not able to see her mother up until recently. When her mother turned 90, they would not allow them in. They had to wear masks. Poor old lady had to wear a mask. She became completely confused because she never saw her family, and they had to pass the gift through the fence and they couldn't touch her. I know stories of people whose family died and were dying that were not allowed to go and see them and say goodbye to them. So there's those kinds of stories. Then there's stories where people lost jobs. So South Africans have not coped well, but it's lifting up again. Minimum hours, job losses, retrenchment. Those are the kind of people I'm seeing. Relationships where they can't stand each other because of all the external pressures. So those are the kind of people that I'm helping so that they can go inside, understand why they're feeling how they are, and there are massive possibilities. It doesn't matter which strata of society you come from. It's not a difference whether they're very wealthy or they're poor. So those are people that I'm helping.
Right.
So that they have a vision, they have something to hope for. So helping other people evolve, that's really what it's about. And that is the thrill when it happens.
Yeah, and that acronym for hope, it's amazing. Most people don't realize they just think I'm here to give hope and stuff like that. But unless you're down at the grassroots, unless you're down in the trenches digging and working, it's of no value, honestly. And that's exactly what the people that I discuss with and talk with are coming out with. Last week,
I learned that from Mr. Nair. Yeah, Mr. Nair taught me that acronym as well.
But see, the key element here is, Rose, what are some of the other areas? Conflict resolution was one. What are some of the other areas? Suicide is another, but key areas of empowerment that you have felt, where you can go in there and help them step up further rather than just, working on the negativity there.
Well, it's been career. So, for example, when, with a lot of retrenchments happening or people anticipating retrenchment, then a lot of the stuff links to mental health.
Yes.
People are depressed because whether it's family, relationship, career, finance, fun and recreation. You weren't allowed to go to the beaches. You weren't allowed to go out and walk. So all of these, everything for me impacted massively on mental health. Right. And so more antidepressants, more suicide, more drugs, more anxiolytics, more sleeping pills, more drinking, more smoking, more beating, more obesity, self-esteem dropping, not going out of the house, not taking care of yourself. So those are massive points of pain that I am working with people. And transformation is happening. As soon as people understand themselves, as soon as they make that inner change, as soon as they understand how to make good decisions and have a vision and something to work towards, it's powerful. But it begins with you.
Exactly. It begins with you. And unless you do that, nothing comes out. And that's why I carry this 10-word, 2-letter phrase with me constantly. If it is to be, it is up to me.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. But, David, that just reminds me of relationships. If it is to be, it's up to me. So what happens when we meet each other? You see something in me that you think is going to fill you, and I see something in you that I think is going to fill me. So initially we have a great relationship, and then what happens? You're not giving me what we signed up for, and I'm not giving you what we signed up for. Then we start fighting. Then we start having affairs. We might beat each other up. We might strangle. We might rape. We might get divorced, and then we'll go to the next person that we want to fill that gap. So that just triggered that point in me. So we cannot go into a job, a relationship, into any area, key area of our life, and to expect other people to complete us. We have to do that inside work. Like, it depends on me. If it is to be, it depends on me. If you don't do that, you're going to blame people forever. He doesn't listen to me. He doesn't do that for me. She doesn't do that. My boss doesn't. My co-workers always ignore me. Or we have to look at ourselves. And when you are complete, you will have a successful life.
Coming out of corporate, obviously you would have enjoyed working there for a period of time, and there were some pain points in which you struggled. Out of it now, you're heading off into a coaching career, consulting wise. Could you just corner in about three of your main pain points that plagued you for the 2.5 decades or so that you worked as in a corporate career, and then turn it around to say, I want freedom. And the only way I can get freedom is for me to surrender this pain and catch on to something else and anchor myself. So can you just journey through that?
I can. So I think the first thing that in corporate, and I worked in massive corporates, I never worked in any so big companies. So first of all, although you have the window dressing that, as a person you are important, at the end of the day, in my experience, I found that what was more important was hitting the targets, hitting the quarterly goals, and making as much profit as possible. So that was the important thing. What happened that really used to get me, that people were just left in heaps, not being acknowledged, not being thanked, unless you belonged to certain groups. There were always certain groups that made sure that their people were looked after. So, for me, it was like justice was not equal. I can give you an example, like for something small, if I may. So we initially, when I did all of the anatomy and physiology, and they were intensive for big drugs and products, and it was tough learning for the guys. But if anybody was caught cheating, they had to be fired. There and then they would be fired. And at the beginning of the sessions, and you'd have sometimes groups of 30, I'd say, okay, this is one of the rules. If you're battling, you need to speak to me, because the rule is here, if you are caught cheating, you will be fired. And that's that. So, you get the signs when people are hopping in and out to the loo because they're going to check their notes or whatever. But there was a certain company where a certain person cheated and they were not fired because they were friends or sort of interrelated with somebody on the executive board. So that person was not fired. A director told me that I was very hard and to give this person slack. And then I said, but why were the other people fired without a blink? And then I heard, they used to go on very lavish conferences on cruises. And I heard that this particular person was booked on a cruise, and I went to HR and said, what are you doing? How can this person go on a cruise? What kind of message are you sending out? For me, even if it's just for me, because the justice is never equal. So for me, fighting for justice and making sure everybody is treated equally is a big pain point. Was always a big pain. Fairness for everybody. Recognize everybody, treat everybody the same. So that was my biggest pain point. And also pushing people to the limit, like, very task focused. That, I talk about high pressure, low touch. So the EQ side was not there. And as the years went by in corporate, as companies became more and more competitive, that people touch was lost. And I mean, there are all sorts of programs. If you're a drug addict, you can go there, and then there's this day, and we'll have that funny. It wasn't that. It was the individual. So if you're a director and you walk past me, and you walk past me every day, but you never look at me and greet me. And I'm thinking,
Right.
he doesn't even look at me. He doesn't recognize me. He doesn't respect me for the job I'm doing if I'm a cleaner. So it was those kinds of things. And people would get really upset. And I taught people, you cannot control what that person is doing. And there
Right.
was one person in particular who never greeted people. And I said to him, he doesn't, that person doesn't greet me either. So I've made a game of it. So some days I say, good morning, David. And David would go, he'd grunt. I'd say, good morning, David. And they wouldn't speak to you. And then maybe once every 2 months, I'd tick in my calendar, I'd have morning. And I used to share this story with them and they would feel, a whole lot better. So those were the big points. So people were pushed to the point of getting sick. And even when they were sick, they came to work because they had to get the job finished. And they didn't even want to stay at home and not come to work. So it was all task, not the soul.
Coming out of that, without that on your shoulder now, how are you finding this coached to coaching, so to speak?
I'm loving it, David.
Hi, heavenly.
I'm loving it.
Oh, I see.
I love it. Yeah.
Right. That's fantastic. Now, with that in mind, identify some of the key areas that gave you a buzz when you could see transformation happening, and then you could see, wow, look at that. Share some of those moments. And people that you've actually had some transformation work with.
Yes. I mean, well, there was one person particularly who joined my program, a very, very, very clever nuclear scientist kind of guy who always looked down and never smiled. And it took me 5 weeks for this person to say, I am phenomenal. I am phenomenal. I'm phenomenal. But at the end, he was phenomenal. He was going to marry the king of a daughter. He was going to buy an igloo in the Antarctic. But I was so thrilled because he was so introverted with such a low self-esteem because of his upbringing. So to see that person smile was one of my biggest buzz moments. And when he could truly say, I am phenomenal. And he sent me a photograph, and he'd been to the Northern Lights. He'd sent me a photograph of an igloo, and he said, this is the one I'm going to buy. So that is a buzz moment. That is a buzz moment. It's a joy. And my big joy, what I get a buzz moment is when people smile. You can see they're really smiling. They're excited about their life. They want it to work. Those are my buzz moments, David. And my best moment is when somebody signs up because I know. I say to them, this is a transformational journey. You will never be the same as you were. And like you rightly said, baby steps, one step at a time. And then I will keep note of everything and I'll say, right, so what kind of transformation do you think? No, so I said, okay, remember this, remember that, remember the day you smiled.
Fabulous.
Right. So those are buzz moments. And helping people, knowing that you can help people to help themselves, to help others.
Right.
That is another buzz moment.
Right. Fabulous. Talk about the areas of an individual in relation to their mind map, their vision. How different were they? You've worked culturally with a number of different people. So how different were they when you moved from culture to culture in relation to what they're striving for in life? And then how did you accommodate that?
Well, that's like a big question for me, David. Culture, South Africa, apartheid. We're a rainbow nation. We have 13 different languages, official languages. We have all sorts of tribes, and you can see people think I'm British, but I'm French, Irish, German heritage, and but I'm an African.
Yes.
So this is something that really makes me think. I don't know how much time I've got to talk on this point. 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'll give you 5 max.
Okay. So first of all, I grew up very free. in
Right.
Africa, Central Africa. I grew up very protected and very free, and then I studied as a nurse, and then I got exposed to some shocks in life, you know, where we would catch a bus and my black and colored colleagues went on one bus and I had to go on another bus. So that was my first culture shock, because I didn't grow up in a home like that. We had to respect and greet everybody the same. Then that was my first big shock. And my next big shock was when I traveled in Europe during the height of apartheid, and when people asked us where we were from, we said South Africa, and then they would throw stones at us, they'd threaten us, they'd spit on us and call us racist. And that was a big shock. So it really got me thinking very, 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 very deep. So can I tell you something? Working globally like I have, all of those experiences growing up, our DNA is 98% the same, David.
Exactly.
The 2% that makes the difference are my blue eyes, my height, and the color of my skin. And I have taken people through those, and they have wept and said, but why, if it's only 2%, are people like that? Because that's how they've been taught. And that is something that I'm working on and trying to change. So culturally, gender, age, height, weight, culture, you know, it doesn't matter. We all have the same issues. We have exactly the same issues. Women throughout the world are fighting for their rights, even in South Africa. Women are fighting for equal pay. Women are fighting to be recognized. That is still a big issue. And I know in India, that's a big issue as well. And I know in Kenya, it's a big issue. So these are massive, massive issues that we are fighting for, and we have to know our value. I don't know if I've answered your question, David, but diversity, the only diversity is in that 2% of DNA.
See, the interesting thing when you mentioned about the apartheid movement and the Springboks when they came to Australia back in the late 70s and early 80s, just prior to Nelson Mandela's freedom run. Here in Australia, that's the same thing that happened. You know, it came to a point where there was a deadlock as to whether they will play rugby because of the black-white issue. Now,
it's really bad.
It was. But see, most people don't realize that. Now, that those people that came out of that age, why I'm driving this is, those people that came out of that age, they have certain implanted limiting beliefs.
Yes. So, David, can I give you an example?
Please.
So when I went to Mumbai, so for example, I did my certification in Cape Town, and this is how people think. I just want you to see how people think. And we have a very big Muslim community in Cape Town, huge. And so I qualified with Muslims and the women with the scarves and everything. And off we went to India, and I went on a stage with a beautiful young man who's Muslim, a psychologist.
Right.
And we had a ball, and we planned this lovely 20 minutes in front of 1,000 coaches. And then our Khan took us out for dinner. And sitting in the taxi, at the back of the taxi, this young man said, "Oh, I can't wait to tell my parents I was on the stage with an elderly white woman." And I was shocked, educated. And that reminded me of that. I didn't take offense. I'm beyond being offended for that. And then one of my friends asked me if I had converted to Islam, because they saw a close friend, because they saw me with photographs with my beautiful Muslim colleague coaches with their duks. So it's perception, it's entrenched. And that shocked me. So there's also so much work to be done. And that's people that came from the past that were not treated well. And I really understand that.
Yeah.
But it's for our generation now to change it.
See, this is a concern. You know, most people who don't have the depth of understanding in that particular little context that you touched on would misinterpret that particular statement given by that individual. And off in a tangent, hence starting a conflict. And it could be as small as just a statement such as that. Unless you are big enough and wise enough and have the wisdom to realize, hey, listen, that's got nothing to do with you or I. It's got everything to do with the individual that's come up. And how can I help transform that guy?
I had such a laugh. I really laughed. And then I was told I'm not like the others, of my color. I'm different. Whoever the others are, but it's such fun. So everybody has their thing, and it's them and they. The generalizations, our unconscious, what would you call it, mindset. All women are stupid. All Indians just want to haggle. All Americans are obese. So there's massive generalizations.
Right. It's unfortunate, but that's how it is.
Mindset.
This opens up a subject. This is where most people focus on education and thinking that education is the mainstream education. That's all they need. I come up with a different philosophy, and I have what I call a 3 E's to education. And you've just touched on the second one. The first one, obviously, is your mainstream education, which allows you your technical information that you need to keep your work going and stuff like that. But the second one is what we call exposure, which is what you've just addressed. And that unless a person has the exposure, you're going to find that person would not have the wisdom or the understanding to move up. Okay, and therefore, if a coach is limited with that, and an individual is limited with that, guess what is going to happen to the limiting belief of that person? Park that aside. The third form of education, in my opinion, is what I call experience. And that is role modeling, which means we capsule excellence. We cannot capsule perfection. I don't believe in perfection. We capsule excellence. Okay. And when you capsule excellence, today you will be excellent at 8 out of 10. Tomorrow it could be a 9 out of 10. It doesn't matter. It keeps grading up. So when you capsule excellence, and you can role model that excellence with numerous people, and that's what we do in coaching. And that's going to be a powerhouse. Because when you have that, your mainstream education, your exposure that we speak of, and last but not least, the experience of others, the role modeling of others, you're now going to be a dynamite. And that's what, as a coach, when we understand that, we go out and reach for it. Now, a lot of us coaches go for self-improvement, self-education. And we know on the other side, when a client is coming in, they don't have that. So we need to now understand the empathy and understanding of how we can go down and ensure that we can uplift them to that level such that they're not left behind. How much of that have you felt as an experience and a need for you to start working with when you start looking at coaching?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, I might tell you that most of my clients are not white like me.
Right.
I work with clients across the board. So I think, David, I think to answer that question, and even, to mention, it's like you said, exposure. So the whole program and the journey we've been on as coaches in this mixed community has given us insight into each other's lives, and knowing that there are no mysteries, and actually we're not that different. So firstly, I had 2 Muslim coaches, colleagues, who said to me they will only be coaching Muslim women.
Right.
The other day, one of those coaches said to me, I want to broaden. So I said, what do you want to do? She said, men and women. So I said, Muslim. She said, no, anybody. So that's how they have grown. And it's proving your theory 100%. It's exposure. Because it's not them and us.
Yes, exactly. It's you and I together, the infusion. Now, the interesting thing is, and associating with you, it's rubbed off.
Yes. So I was fortunate in corporate. I worked across all cultures. I grew up with all colors. So I'm very blessed, and also blessed in what my parents entrenched in me. Respect everyone, yeah.
Fabulous.
I don't know if I've answered that question. I have seen the transformation in my colleagues.
Right. It's powerful. I mean, that's the basic thing. I mean, and this is not taking any credit or kudos to yourself. It is actually, saying, here I am, and I'm here as a coach to do this to you. And some people can misinterpret that. That's their problem. But as long as you stay steadfast on it and say, I'm going to search forward and do this. While we're on that subject, we've gone through the journey of you coming out of corporate. We're looking at how you can get into this freedom area. I'd like you to share a little bit about where 2 years from now you're going to look at, and how this journey is going to help you with your tapestry of life.
Wow, what a tapestry. Something about the tapestry of life, you only see that golden thread when you look back, don't you?
Exactly, in retrospect.
I've now decided to weave that golden thread going forward. So basically, I want to reach hundreds and thousands of people, not only women, men and women across the world, to help people to help themselves. So I've written 2 books. So by the end of in about 8 weeks, I'll have 3 books published. One is a co-authored one. So that is a great journey. And we reach each other through social media. We can reach each other through corporate, because the program that I use, the system I use, is it's for anyone. So I have that powerful system, the Incredible You. Very, very powerful. So I'm aiming to, my vision is to really reach people around the world, but specifically Africa and India, because that's where my heart lies. And I think I identify so well with the people, because I used to work in Eastern Sub-Saharan Africa and also India. But get into communities and help women empower themselves so they can help other people, help people understand who they are so that they can have a better life. You don't have to be stuck in poverty. You don't have to be stuck in a low self-esteem. I just have such a passion looking in the next 2 years to have had so many people go through my sessions, or even mentoring people or coaching coaches to coach and help people, and also speaking on a public platform regarding more relationships than anything else, because for me, that is the big issue.
Right. And outcomes from that. What could you put a couple of milestone outcomes that you want to achieve? Such that the community can be impacted.
Yeah, the community impacted. So I think just looking, number one, at my local community. There are so many groups in the community that need help that I have already reached out to for groups of women. So the community can be helped in knowing if they change their mindset, they will have a successful relationship. They know that they can find a job no matter what their inner voices are telling them. So that is a massive outcome, because if you have money, you have the relationship, you have the mindset, you understand what people are doing, that impact, it has a ripple effect. So that is what I'm looking for. And people, also need to change the mindset, because jobs are not going to be in corporate anymore. So to start looking at different ways, how do we use social media? What can we do online? What can we do digitally? You don't have to travel to an office. You don't need to spend money on transport. You don't need a bus ticket. You can work from your phone if you don't have a laptop. So that is the kind of impact, letting people see bigger and greater possibilities.
Touching on social media, you just opened up my thought process. You were talking something a while back about, this is not in our discussions with this interview, a while back on how Zooming was impacting people and research that's been through. You want to just address that issue?
Yeah. So, David, as COVID broke, then people weren't allowed to go to work, and then you had to get onto Microsoft Teams. Webinars were, because we worked internationally, then webinars started happening.
Right.
And then Zoom. And so people became very fatigued. I did 2 videos on Zoom fatigue. because we do not have that touch, that connect with people. So you and I are speaking, but we're not getting the same energy. So what happened is Zoom, and then there's a chat, and there's all these emojis popping up, and you're trying to focus on what you're saying, and you're trying to get everybody to focus and put on their cameras. And now how are we reading people? So now we had to focus 100 times more on reading people. Like I can see you watching the time now, for example. Maybe you're thinking, maybe she should hurry up. So now I'm going to slow it down because I'm reading your body language. So we learned those skills, but it was exhausting because we weren't used to doing that. But now we can do it so well. I'll just tell you very quickly, we talk about Zoom towns in South Africa, where younger people and older people are moving out near seaside places where they only have to come into the city once a week. You can do everything on Zoom. You can have the odd meeting face to face. You can take the kids to school. So now it's become a blessing. Whereas before, so now we even have Zoom towns where, you know, if you want to come into the city, you can. Otherwise, you can live in a more peaceful environment. So the result there are better schools, better shopping centers, etc., etc. So that's a good thing that has come out of that.
Right. It's interesting, you know, Rose, a lot, in fact, all of what you've expressed here has been taught in different coaching formats. And one of the key things I did, and I'm actually wanting to talk a little bit about this for about 30 seconds, is I consolidated two and a half decades of this experience in the book that you see in the back up there called I Excel Fight for Success. And that has a lot of what we're talking about. And I was thinking, you know, as we were chatting, I thought, you know, because earlier today somebody had asked me, you know, is there a way I can get the book? It's on Amazon. But particularly for this crowd, because we're touching on coaching, particularly for this crowd and whoever is listening hereafter, just send us a email on admin@davidnair.net, and I think the team will be providing you with probably a 35-40% discount on that particular book. It's at a giveaway, and it's available at Amazon right across the globe.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's there. But Rose, one of the things I want to close off with, I want to capsule your message for the audience in 3 top takeaways that you think you can share with them so they can take out of here and go and do a couple of the practices so they can at least step up.
Yeah, I would say believe in yourself.
Right.
Believe that you can do it. Imagine yourself. Imagine yourself doing different things. Get used to your freedom. Get used to the ability. Think about the possibility of being free, not sitting in the traffic. Think about the possibility of working from home, enjoying your own space where you can do what you want to do. And think about getting used to the sound of your footsteps, walking away from things that you're not meant to do. That's what I want you to think about. You will just reinvent yourself. But you must want it, and you are the one that has to look for it. You are the one that has to make the decision. But I just want to say to you, fly to freedom. It's there for all of us, but it begins inside.
Yes. If it is to be, it is up to me.
It starts from me. It's up to me, but it's possible.
Excellent. Excellent. Rose, it's been such a privilege and a pleasure to sit down and talk with you. I mean, after all this 2.5 years, actually on a platform.
Amazing.
And I know we're going to work together in a number of other areas downstream. But let me just thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for being a good guest that you are, to take your time off from your busy schedule and say, okay, I'm going to contribute something to the community at large. Appreciate your help, lady. Thank you so much and love you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much. And everybody take the jump. Fly.
And fly for freedom.
Love you too, David. Thank you so much.